So, here we are with
Tanya Janca.
Tanya Janca, also known as She Hacks Purple. She is an independent security consultant specializing in software and cloud security. Her obsession with securing software runs deep, from starting her company to running her own OWASP chapter for 4 years, and founding the OWASP Dev Slop open source and education project. With her countless blog articles, workshops, and talks, her focus is clear. Tanya is also an advocate for diversity and inclusion, co-founding the international women's organization, WOSEC, starting the online, the online hashtag Mentoring Monday initiative, and personally mentoring, advocating for, and enabling countless other women in her field. As a professional computer geek of 20 plus years, she is a person who is truly fascinated by the science of computer science. Give it up for Tanya!
Thank you. Thank you for coming to my talk. There's a whole bunch of really good talks for this entire conference, and some of them are at the same time as mine, so I appreciate you choosing mine. This is going to be the lightning version of this talk, because usually it's a full hour where I try to melt your brains out of your ears. So you're only going to get 25 minutes of that. Let's start. So this is called Purple is the New Black, and we're going to talk about purple teams. And by that I mean, we're going to talk about modernizing application security. Because essentially, we can't have modern apps and then not change the way we do security, because then we're only going to be catching some of the problems and protecting them partially. So I'm going to talk about all new things, not old stuff. I'm skipping that on purpose. All right, let's do this. So we always do the mandatory about me slide because we want you to think that we're qualified to give our own talks. It's not like the bragging thing. It's just like, I need you to know I'm a person. I do lots of stuff. I hope you're going to stay the whole time. I'm obsessed with OWASP. I am a big part of WOSEC. And I train and do stuff. So that's me. Hi. OK, on to the talk. So I'm just going to talk about modern application security. And normally I would do definitions. But you'll already know that. I'm not going to explain what AppSec is and do all of that warm-up. We're just going to go right into it. All right. OK, so again, I love OWASP. And I have stickers of this after in case you want it. OK. What the purple team does is application security. So you have red teams that attack networks and attack software and attack systems. You have blue teams that defend systems. Those are the people that fix your firewalls, that patch things and implement security tools. But in the middle, between the developers and the security team, is the AppSec team. That's where I live. That's my favorite topic. And that's what we're going to talk about today. OK, so the first thing I want to talk about that's a new thing is zero trust. Way back in the day when I started a long time ago in tech, first of all, there was no security because I'm older than I look. But then eventually we're like, you know what we should do? We should put a big barrier and gate around everything. We'll build a wall. And then that'll keep everyone out and everyone inside. I'm sure we trust them. We have learned that that doesn't actually work that well, because what hackers like to call opportunity, we as defenders call pivoting. And so we don't want them coming in. And if they do, we want it to be awful. We want them to not be able to get anywhere. So that's where zero trust came from. A lot of people just talk about zero trust as it relates specifically to networks, but I believe we can do this with apps, with APIs, anything that talks to anything. Ask first. Ask first, make sure that you trust them. Don't just blindly trust. This is a thing we used to do. I know, because I did it. But now we're not doing that anymore, and we're having better results. And hand in hand with zero trust is assume breach. So let's practice as though we have been breached. Let's assume that someone's been inside. So let's say you have a bug bounty where you work or a responsible disclosure program. If someone reports something to you that's exploitable, act like maybe it was. Go investigate and check it out, right? Do all of the things and act as though you might have been breached. You will unfortunately be right sometimes. I know that sounds bad, but trust me, you will win if you act this way. Okay, so other new things. Serverless is new. Logic apps are new. First, I'm going to explain what they are. Then I'm going to make fun of them. Just kidding, not really. And then I'm going to explain what security things we need to work about. So a logic app is a trigger. So it just calls a serverless app. So let's say If someone tries to log in 10 or more times in 1 second, that will trigger a logic app. A lot of cloud providers have this. They have different names for it, but essentially it's just a trigger. A serverless app is a script, a little tiny piece of software that usually just does one thing, and it does not live on a server. That's why it's called serverless. So basically, when it gets triggered by a logic app or called directly from an application, it explodes a container, runs itself, and then self-destructs. So you don't have to pay for server time the whole time. Guess what? We still have to secure them. I don't think everyone knows yet, though. Ask any pen tester. People seem to be thinking like, it's 1990 again, security doesn't count. No, that's not true. It still counts. So we still need to do all the same AppSec stuff that we normally do. So we need to sanitize our inputs, right? I know that sounds really obvious, like we need to authenticate and authorize people, like we can't just let everyone in. I know that this sounds like really obvious. Apparently it's not, but there's more. Okay, so these are, yes, so we want to monitor and log our functions, but then we want to, actually I'm getting ahead of myself. We want to do secure coding and we want to make sure we verify or that we secure our data in transit, and then if you put in a database, obviously at rest. But there's new stuff, so this is the new stuff, modern improvements. So we want to do an API gateway. I know we talked about how gates were bad like 4 seconds ago. But what I mean by this is like no one is allowed talking to the APIs unless they come in through the gateway. And then you still have secured your APIs within there, but it's one more layer of defense in depth. And then on top of that, we want to not only monitor and log our functions, we want that information to go to the SIM because we want to pick up on when there are anomalies and problems. And if no one's actually looking at those logs, we won't find them. I have so many stories about us logging things and then finding out years later, oh, that looks really bad in 2011. Anyway, next. We want to manage our secrets in a secret store. So way back in the day when we used to save our stuff directly into our code, that became bad. Then we put in the database, that became bad. Now we use secret stores and your APIs can too. And lastly, oh no, there's two more. We want our APIs or our serverless apps to generally just do one thing. We don't want one serverless app that does 500 things because that's an app. Just write an app, right? Like if you have each serverless app just do one tiny thing, if one of them's down or one of them's broken, the rest of your app and your functionality still works. So minimal granularity. And then lastly, we want to isolate our function parameters. And by this I mean don't just automatically trust. So if you have an app, you log into it, you authenticate to it. It calls a serverless app. You authenticate to that serverless app. Then that serverless app calls another one. You still need to authenticate there. For some reason, everyone's like, oh, it's fine now. It's not. Okay, next. Awesome. Third-party component and library management. Software supply chain security. There are a lot of tools right now on the market that do this. And then there's a free one from OWASP called OWASP Dependency Check. A lot of people call this open source security, as in managing all of your third-party components, but it doesn't actually matter if it's open source or if it's proprietary source. If there are vulnerabilities in it and you put it in your app and then you release your app, you took all those vulnerabilities, put it right in, and then released them. So it doesn't matter if you're using something that's proprietary like .NET, if you're using something totally open source like Ruby. Both of them are awesome, but I want you to use secure versions. So we usually do something called Software Composition Analysis, or SCA. So I'm going to say something vendors don't like. I think you should use 2 tools, not 1, if you can afford it, because each tool looks at things in a completely different way. And they have different teams looking at different things. And whenever I used to be a pen tester and I would pen test somewhere, they'd say, okay, we'll call you next year. And I would tell them, stupidly, this is why I don't make enough money. I'd be like, you shouldn't hire me. You should hire another pen tester who will look at it with a different set of eyes, and they might find something that I've missed. Like, I like to think I'm perfect, but only me and my mom actually believe that. Okay, and so you also, in my opinion, want to scan your repository often, but then you also want to scan in your build pipeline. I know that this might sound weird, but sometimes you upgrade from a much older version to a newer version, so you've actually gone up a version, but that version's the one with the vulnerabilities. So that's why you want to check in your pipeline, and then you also want to check in your repository specifically because you have lots of legacy apps that you probably don't release very often, But there's still researchers and malicious actors who are still looking at them. And the longer it's been out there, and the longer you haven't checked it for, the more likely that there's actually vulnerabilities that have been documented that are known that you could be catching by scanning your repositories regularly. I already said that. All right, next. I'm trying really hard to keep on time. Okay, so online storage, crown jewels. When I first started going to security conferences, open S3 buckets were like this really big joke, and everyone's like, ha 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 ha, because apparently we laugh at our victims. That's what we do. But I'm really happy that all of the cloud providers have learned from that, and now all of them are by default making the settings quite secure, but we can do more. So on top of making like them not being open by default, there's a lot more now. So one, you can make templates with whoever your cloud provider is. All the major public clouds do this, so that every new container or storage container that's created underneath your organization or your subscription has a template that it must follow, and you can just lock that down. Really, you can harden the crap out of that. And then on top of that, I suggest that everyone start classifying their data. Who thinks data classification is really fun and exciting? Just kidding. Who here does instant response, and when you find out that all the data that's been leaked is public, feels really relieved? Yeah, I totally have strands of hair that are all gray, and they're because people didn't label or classify their data. Not kidding. So please classify your data. It really, really, really helps your incident responders, and it helps everyone know what to do with it. Next, we should monitor these containers. What? I know I'm wild. And we should alert on them. Most of the cloud providers will let you, like they have all sorts of automatic monitoring and all of that you can do, but you could do some yourself. Like we talked about earlier with triggers and serverless, you can create your own triggers and have serverless do things for you. That's what code is. It's computers doing your bidding. That's why I like it. So I strongly suggest monitoring all your containers and setting up alerts. If you have a public cloud provider, give it your phone number if you're on the security team. It might sound silly, but I had Azure call me once, and I was so glad it had my phone number. Just once in 2 years, but gosh, it mattered. Anyway, next. You should also audit this and make sure that you're only accessing your containers. Sorry, I shouldn't say containers. You should only access your online storage using a service account. So I used to, back in the day, because I started programming at the beginning of time, I would use Tanya's account. Tanya's account would access the database, and Tanya's account would do this, and Tanya's account would do that, and then Tanya would go find a better job, and then all the things are broken. So instead, we want to have service accounts doing things. So it's not Tanya at 4 a.m. that appears to think that she needs to log into blah, blah, blah. If you see a service account doing that, you're like, okay, I know what's going on. But if you see Tanya doing that, there's probably a problem. And if an incident hasn't already been called and started, you probably should start one. Okay, next, containers and orchestration. So I'm going to explain first. I know that a lot of you probably know this, and sometimes I over-explain, but I do that because when I first went to a security conference, I couldn't understand anything the whole 2 days, and I just walked around like this. And I really want to make sure everyone understands the whole talk, so I don't mean to patronize anyone. I know most of you know this, but for the few that don't. So we used to run servers on physical machines, and then eventually we started creating virtual machines, or VMs. So we would take an operating system, smush it, run it in a hypervisor on a server so we could run a few on the same machine. But then a very smart person created containers. Containers are even smaller. So a virtual machine might need 2 gigs of space and 2 gigs of memory to run. So you could put maybe 2 or 3 or 4 on a server. A container you can run with sometimes 2 megs of memory and 4 megs of space. So you can put a whole bunch of containers and run them all at the same time. Makes things faster, smaller, and you only have the parts of the operating system you truly need. And then orchestration is the managing of all the containers, deleting, loading them up, taking them down. All the things that you do with containers is orchestration. Okay, now you're experts. Please still do regular network security on these things. Please still make sure your configurations make sense. It sounds really silly, but sometimes we get new tech and we are so excited, IoT, and then we just forget all about the rules of security. And it's bad people don't forget, unfortunately. So we have to be diligent right from the very beginning, and that includes with fun containers. Plus, basically, it's kind of the same as previous, like with virtual machines, except for there's new configurations, there's new security tools, there's new types of scanning, there's new types of vulnerabilities, but you still basically need to look out for vulnerabilities, and you still need to, a lot of people say you shouldn't patch, you would just create a new updated version and then release that and delete the old one. But the point is that you absolutely need to make sure that they are secure. You can't just put a container out there for a year and then just let it go. I mean, you could, but it's going to be very bad. Also, specifically with containers, you really need to watch out for who has the rights to edit them, create them, or delete them. This is a brand new area of interest for people who don't have your best interests at heart. So please watch that. And then lastly, just do all the same things you would normally do. Like you still need to protect them in all the same way that you would protect anything on your network. Okay, next. Sorry I'm going fast, but like I said, we have only a few minutes left. Okay, so APIs and microservices. Am I going to explain what this is? Yes. So an API stands for Application Programming Interface, but it's basically an app with no front end. And it can do whatever you want, except for have a front end. So there's no GUI, but it does all those other things. And then a microservice is an API that just does one single thing. The idea of a microservice is that if you have an app that then would call one giant API, if instead you have 20 microservices, if one of them's down, the rest of your app still works, and that's pretty great. So, guess what? We still have to do basic AppSec. We still need to make sure our inputs are good. We still want to use everything with TLS. We still want to do all the stuff that you already obviously have memorized and always do perfectly. You need to do that, but more, there's always more. A new thing, well, it's not really that new, but it must be new because not everyone's using it yet. ServiceMatch. ServiceMatch is a layer of infrastructure and all of your APIs can go through it and then it protects it end to end. You don't have to change any code. Yes, that sounds great. All the cloud providers offer it. There's also third-party ones. They're interoperable, and yeah, I like the idea of having an extra layer of security. Standardization or templating for your org. I have worked at a lot of places where a whole bunch of different teams were all making APIs and they're all excited and everyone was a snowflake. Snowflakes are bad in security. Snowflakes make it hard for me to do my job. I mean, if you're a contractor pen tester, you're like, yeah, I'm awesome. Look at all these snowflakes. But as someone who is quite often, or until recently, used to always be the employee, where it's like, I own that API. I sit next to those people. You want to have standardization and templating whenever you can. I'm also a big fan of linting. Linting is like the grammar police, but for your code. I remember the first time a developer showed me a new language and they're telling me, you don't even have to declare what type of variable it is. It'll just figure it out from the context. No. No poetic license anymore. The grammar police are here and we are linting. So you can lint your APIs and make sure that it's following the language or the standard to the code. It's really very helpful, even though if at the time it's pointing out your bugs, it might seem really annoying, but then when your app doesn't get breached, it feels good later. Throttling and resource quotas. Oh my gosh, I only have 5 minutes left. Okay, well that's self-explanatory. You should authenticate and then you should authorize. You should hide what you can and not share any extra information. And please whitelist the HTTP verbs or methods that you use. It's get and post. And then everything else, just block it unless you have a really good reason. Okay, modern tooling. So I'm going to go through this really quickly because we have 5 minutes and I talk too much. These are new types of tools. I asked interactive application security testing, RASP. This is like a WAF, only not as crappy. Way, way better. WAFs are slow. Okay, stop it, Tanya. No, I just mean that I'm talking too much, not that I'll always make fun of WAFs. Okay, file integrity monitoring, which goes hand in hand with application waitlisting. This is something that I strongly advise people should put on their servers so that only the things that are supposed to run on your servers run and nothing else. Cloud native controls. Each one of the public cloud providers has their own special things that they have made specifically only for their cloud. If you are paying for their service, take advantage and use all the free stuff you can. Adding security to your DevOps pipelines. I'm sure there's been a lot of talk about that, and there will be tomorrow at 3 in room 16. Customizing your alerts, automating responses using serverless and logic apps as triggers. And I don't know what to call this new type of tool, but basically there's a whole bunch of systems out there right now which will inventory all of your public assets and watch them and tell you when scary stuff happens. No one's come up with a really cute acronym that ends in AST or ASP yet, but I'm sure someone will. Okay, modern tactics, and then we are done. Adding security to your DevOps pipelines. Creating negative unit tests instead of just positive ones. Breaking security activities into sprints. Turning pen test results into unit tests so you can have regressive security testing. Tuning tools via automation and efficiency. Automating repository scans. It's just sitting there, right? Why not just take advantage? Et cetera, et cetera. This is basically all I ever talk about in my talks. Like, I'm a broken record. Application security. Okay, so, oh yeah, we can't talk about DevSecOps. There's not gonna be time for that. But I'm trying to press the button and it's going, okay. And I'm gonna have to skip a few slides. I'm really sorry. I've definitely done this in 25 minutes before, but maybe we started late. Cloud security, some apps live in the cloud. If you're a software developer and you have an app that is living in the cloud, if the cloud is wildly insecure, you're still in trouble, okay? And lastly, this is a summary. If you're gonna take a photo of a slide, this is the slide you want. And after this, I'm gonna give you some resources, so keep your phones out. Do I have like 2 minutes left? Okay, so resources. All these resources are free. OWASP. Who here is part of their local OWASP chapter? Awesome. I dream of the day where all your hands go up. We're cuddly, cuddly security, cuddly Care Bears. We really are. Women of Security, we're gonna host a CTF tomorrow morning and we're gonna crash RSA Tuesday night. So Women of Security welcomes you if you are a woman or you identify at all as a woman. Please come and meet lots of other friends. And every Monday on Twitter, I use this hashtag to try to pair mentors and mentees. Who here has worked in security for 2 years or more? Congratulations, all of you are qualified to be mentors. I bet you didn't know that. You know enough to do your job, and there's someone who wishes they knew enough to do your job so they could apply. Please consider reaching out. And lastly, you can follow me. I'm biased, but I think I'm great. And now let's summarize. What have we learned today? We learned some modern tools, some modern practices, required so that we can secure our apps. We can't keep doing things the old way. If we want to secure things, developers and ops aren't going to wait for us. They're not. So we have to get with wherever they're going and follow as closely as we can. Thank you very much for your time today.